The diplomatic summons from the Hegemony Council had been written with immaculate politeness. Every word was technically respectful, every sentence perfectly formal, and yet the insult was impossible to miss. Docking Bay 114C, the smallest docking slot on the entire orbital station. A narrow maintenance bay designed for courier skiffs, sanitation barges, and repair drones. The implication behind the assignment was clear. Humanity was not considered important enough to receive proper accommodations inside the command tower of the massive Hegemony Station Crown of Unity. And docking controller Rethker studied the incoming flight schedule with open amusement. "So the humans are actually coming," he muttered. One of his assistants leaned over the console. "The Earth delegation confirmed arrival 2 hours ago." Rethkar's crest feathers lifted slightly in amusement, and they accepted Bay 114C. "Yes, controller." Several nearby technicians chuckled. It was a subtle humiliation, but a deliberate one. For decades, the Hegemony had treated Earth as a second-tier species. Humans were newcomers to the interstellar stage. Their fleets were small, their territory limited, their political influence minimal. Assigning them a maintenance bay was simply a reminder of that reality. Rethker activated the external scanners. "Let's see what our little human visitors brought with them." The long-range sensors swept the outer system. For several seconds, nothing appeared. Then the alarms began. A sharp electronic warning filled the control chamber. One technician blinked in confusion. "That's strange." Rethker frowned. "What is it?" "There's a hyperspace rupture forming near the outer approach vector. That's where the Earth vessels should arrive." The technician nodded slowly. "Yes, but the mass reading is incorrect." Rethker leaned closer to the console. "Incorrect how?" The numbers kept climbing. Tonnage estimates recalculated again and again. Each update produced a larger result. "That's impossible," the technician whispered. "What is—" The young officer swallowed. "Controller, the approaching vessel is enormous." Rethker scoffed. "Perhaps their shuttle has a bulky cargo module?" The technician shook his head. "No, sir. This is far beyond shuttle mass." The hyperspace distortion intensified. Space itself seemed to ripple as something massive forced its way back into normal reality. Another officer spoke up. "Energy output is spiking." "How much?" Rethker asked impatiently. The answer came slowly. "Battleship level." Silence spread across the room. Rethker laughed nervously. That must be a sensor malfunction. But the sensors kept confirming the reading. The approaching vessel was massive. Too massive. The distortion finally collapsed. The ship emerged from hyperspace. The control tower windows darkened automatically too, to compensate for reflected starlight, and suddenly the enormous vessel filled the view. Gasps echoed across the chamber. The human ship was gigantic, nearly 2 kilometers long. A fortress of armored plating and weapon systems, layer upon layer of reinforced hull sections, stretched across the ship's surface. Heavy rail cannons protruded from rotating turrets. Missile launch grids lined the dorsal spine. Dozens of point defense systems tracked nearby traffic automatically. The vessel moved slowly, confidently, like a predator that knew nothing around it could pose a threat. Civilian ships immediately altered course. Freighters fired maneuvering thrusters. Passenger liners diverted from the traffic lanes. Even several Hegemony patrol cruisers backed away cautiously. Rethker stared in disbelief. That cannot be the Earth delegation. Another officer checked the signal registry. His voice trembled slightly. Identification confirmed. United Earth ship. Aegis Sovereign. A pause. Diplomatic vessel. Rethker blinked. That is not a diplomatic vessel. But the transponder signal was unmistakable. The ship was broadcasting full diplomatic authority. On board the enormous human warship, Admiral Catherine Alvarez stood on the bridge of the Aegis. Sovereign was quiet, orderly, professional crew members moved with calm efficiency. Large, tactical displays showed the surrounding Hegemony station and nearby traffic. Alvarez studied the station, through the forward observation window. Her expression showed mild curiosity. "Communications," she said calmly. "Yes, Admiral. Open a channel to station control." A moment later, the signal connected. The startled face of docking controller Rethker appeared on the bridge display. Alvarez offered a polite nod. "Hegemony Station Control. This is Admiral Catherine Alvarez of the United Earthship Aegis Sovereign, representing the Terran Diplomatic Corps." Her tone was perfectly professional. "We have arrived for the scheduled Council Summit." She paused slightly. "Your message assigned our delegation Docking Bay 114C. The control tower behind Rethker erupted in frantic activity. "That bay is for maintenance craft," he shouted. Alvarez tilted her head slightly. "Yes, you cannot dock that ship there." The Admiral glanced briefly at her navigation officer. "Is our vessel incapable of maneuvering safely?" "Negative, Admiral," the officer replied calmly. "We can fit with 30 meters to spare." Rethker nearly choked. "That berth is not designed for warships." Alvarez blinked innocently. "Warship." She gestured lightly around the bridge. "This vessel is a diplomatic embassy." The hegemony controller stared at her in disbelief. "That ship has enough weapons to conquer a star system." Alvarez folded her hands behind her back. "Space can be unpredictable for diplomats." Inside the hegemony command chamber, alarms began sounding. Security officers rushed to their stations. Military analysts studied the incoming vessel with growing concern. One officer whispered to Rethker, "Controller, ship's shield output alone exceeds our station defense grid." Rethker felt his confidence draining rapidly. A new holographic figure suddenly appeared on the communication screen. "Hi, Counselor," the senior diplomat of the Hegemony Council. His voice was cold. "Admiral Alvarez." "This display is highly inappropriate." Alvarez smiled faintly. "I disagree. You arrived in a warship," Marvick continued sharply. "This summit concerns peaceful trade negotiations." Alvarez's smile faded. "So it does." She stepped slightly closer to the display. "But when your council assigned Earth the smallest docking bay on your station, when you've scheduled our delegation during the lowest traffic cycle, when your office neglected to provide critical agenda documents, you made something very clear." The bridge grew silent. Marvick's expression hardened. "And what would that be?" Alvarez's voice became colder. "That the hegemony does not believe humanity deserves respect." She gestured toward the massive ship surrounding them. "So we decided to simplify the conversation." Several hegemony officers began reviewing the battleship's specifications. Shield output, weapon range. Energy reserves. Every reading was worse than the last. One officer whispered nervously, "Counselor, this vessel could destroy our station." Alvarez heard the comment through the open channel. She responded calmly, "We are not here to destroy anything." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "We are here to negotiate." A sudden alert interrupted the moment. A hegemony sensor officer spoke urgently. "Multiple hyperspace ruptures detected." Marvick frowned. "From where?" "Outer approach vector." 3 more distortions appeared. Space twisted violently. 3 additional ships emerged, each one nearly as large as the Aegis Sovereign, each one broadcasting diplomatic authority. Marvick stared in shock. "What are those?" Alvarez didn't even turn around. "Oh," she said lightly. "Our delegation." The council chamber fell completely silent. Marvick finally exhaled slowly. "You planned this." Alvarez smiled again. "Diplomacy requires preparation." She folded her hands again. "Now, shall we discuss trade agreements?" The negotiations that followed became legendary for the first time. The hegemony listened carefully to Earth's proposals. Border disputes were resolved fairly. Trade restrictions were lifted. Exploration rights were expanded. Every agreement favored balance instead of dominance. When the Terran fleet finally prepared to depart, the hegemony station watched quietly. The enormous ships aligned for hyperspace. Before leaving, Admiral Alvarez transmitted one final message to the Council. "Next time you invite humanity to negotiations, remember something." Her expression was calm, but her voice carried unmistakable authority. "We are perfectly capable of arriving in a shuttle." She paused, but sometimes it's better to arrive in a battleship. Moments later, the Terran fleet vanished into hyperspace and across the galaxy. Diplomats quietly began repeating a new lesson. Never underestimate humanity, especially when they claim to be arriving peacefully. Because sometimes, human diplomacy travels with battleships,